Welcome everybody to Randomjeanc Reviews, Jamestown. Jamestown is a pixelated bullet hell shooter that uses beautifully handcrafted pixel art. It reminds me of Metal Slug, at least from the visual appeals anyway. As with all bullet hell titles, the reason it contains hell, it's because these games can be insanely difficult. Jamestown has a retro arcade feel with its continuous system and being able to play 4 players on it just like those old 4-player arcade cabinets. You know the ones. Yeah, those. Man, those were cool. Jamestown was developed by Final Form Games and was released on Windows and Mac on June 8th, 2011, and was also ported to PlayStation 4 on March 17th of this year as Jamestown Plus, an updated port with extra weapons, levels, and content. Jamestown currently retails for $9.99 on Steam. In case you haven't noticed yet, Jamestown is an alternative take on early colonial American history where it's the 17th century, but instead of taking place on Earth, it takes place in Mars. And there's plenty of mechs, robots, squids, bullets, and lots of bullets. Did I mention bullets? You play as Sir Walter Raleigh, who narrowly escapes execution and joins the colony of Jamestown. He fears that he has been followed by its captors. There he contemplates his current situation and aids the colonies by defending them from the Spanish and the Martians, who had been allied for some time. The story is interesting, but it's really just a backdrop for the scenes and locations throughout the story. It's not very memorable, or at least not in comparison to the rest of the game, although I'll give him this. The story is very original, just not very intriguing. But I mean, who plays bullet hell shooters for the story? One of the best aspects of this title is the beautiful graphics. Upon research, I found that the developers actually based their work on Capcom's Pro Gear. The animations for just about every creature and machine is top notch. It looks very fluid. It is very reminiscent of 16-bit graphics and retro visuals that many try to emulate, but few succeed as much as this title has. You fight through plenty of different areas, from mining facilities to open floating islands full of mechs and tanks. The variety is great and the scenery is very alien, which is to be expected, but welcomed. Even better is the soundtrack, composed by Francisco Cerda, who doesn't disappoint with his epic soundtrack. His soundtrack for the game offers orchestral scores and highly energetic tunes that fuel your fight against the alien scum. Every single aspect of Jamestown is improved significantly with this incredible soundtrack. That is one worth owning even if you don't like the game. Jamestown is a title that can be beaten quite easily. There are only 5 stages, and each one is about 5 to 8 minutes long. It may sound like it's short, but there is so much to do in each one. Let me explain. Each stage has multiple difficulties within it. While completing a map for the first time might be somewhat difficult, to progress and unlock the next stage, you have to usually beat all previous stages in the next difficulty setting. For example, to unlock the Badlands stage, which is the 3rd stage, you must complete all previous stages in a certain difficulty or higher. Each difficulty greatly enhances the rate at which enemies fire and how many bullets they shoot. It won't add any more enemies because the number of enemies are always the same, but the rate of fire and how much they fire and at the speed of which they fire does change. It can get very intimidating. I mean, look at this insanity. This whole screen is practically bullets. The stages all begin the same way. They start from the bottom and you progress to the top at a locked camera scrolling speed. There are an insane amount of enemies on screen, which really makes you feel like you're on one-man army. Every stage has bosses at the end. Then the battles for each boss really steals the show, as each one is beaten completely differently than the previous one. So, the boss battles never become stale, and even on the default difficulty, stages can be very punishing, but not impossible. Any bullet hits your character on the ship, you are dead. Luckily, bullets can hit the ship, and as long as they miss the person driving the ship, you will survive. It's also worthy of mentioning the game has very tight and responsive controls, as well as control schemes that are 100% responsive. I recommend you use USB controllers such as Xbox or PlayStation controllers for additional players. But for one player, mouse control is perfect enough. As you destroy enemies, most enemies will drop cogs and gears that will fill up your Vaunt meter. Once the meter is full, it will grant you a temporary shield that will absorb and convert all enemy bullets into points for your high score and double your damage. The Vaunt effect lasts a short duration but can be extended if you keep collecting dropped cogs of your falling foes, extending the duration nearly infinitely as long as you keep collecting the gears. You can also always cancel the Vaunt early to grant you a tiny sized shield to use in dire situations where you would have perished otherwise. Vaunt is essential to maximizing your high scores and to earn currency to buy other ships and special challenge stages for those masochistic enough to try to complete them. Many of these have remixed areas of maps that have been completed before but have been heavily modified. For example, there's one that has an insane amount of bombs and another where you have to survive 60 seconds from a hail of bullets and enemies. It's optional but very fun to do these maps, and there are plenty of them to purchase. The base game has 4 ships you can use and 4 additional DLC ships which you can purchase as DLC. Each ship has 2 major abilities, a standard shooting mode and a special weapon mode unique to each ship. The standard ship you have is the beam one, which fires small but fast projectiles that are excellent for crowded areas full of foes, and its special beam attack that is very effective against bosses or strong enemies in one location, at the cost of 50% your movement speed, which creates a perfect balance for each ship and an excellent mechanic for players to utilize. As mentioned before, the game can be played with up to 4 players on local co-op. Sadly, local co-op is the only way to play with friends, as there is no other way to play over an internet connection. Still, this option is still a blast to play, although be prepared to rage quit if your friends suck, because all the continues are spread out evenly, and when you have 4 players, everyone has 1 life. And after someone dies, a certain amount of seconds must be waited upon before you can bring them back to life by picking up a drop power-up upon their death. Jamestown is an excellent title for those who love these styles of games, and for those who want to challenge themselves as well. You can play the entirety of the game's content and bonus challenge missions with 4 people at the same time, and it's a blast to do so, trust me. I would encourage you to play this game with others, as by yourself it's fun, but most of the fun is to be experienced with at least 1 other player. The unique visuals and pounding soundtrack are fantastic, as well as the range of difficulties for maps and even bonus modes, such as Gauntlet, where you have to essentially beat all maps in one succession, which is a feat in itself. The story pays off somewhat near the end, but is not really too memorable besides its initial craziness of the lore itself and its locations. And the game is very short despite its replayability. I feel like if there was at least 1 or 2 more maps, as well as a multiplayer mode, it would have improved the game so much more. Still, the creative boss fights and stages are great, and the final boss fight is so epic. Upon completing it, it will leave you with adrenaline pumping through your veins. I guarantee it. It's a great final boss. Or it will leave you ripping your hair if you keep failing continuously like I did. In all, Jamestown receives a GG, great game. And as usual, upon checking what Steam players thought, they give the title a 96% rating out of 1,555 reviews. I'd say a little bit high, but sometimes there's a difference between us. But still close nonetheless. Thank you guys all for watching and staying here until the end. Next title should be one that is turn-based. If you want to catch my last review of Transistor, click here. Now that Path of Exile Awakening is out, and if you are on the fence of whether or not to jump into the Path of Exile, check my review of it. It's one of my most popular videos, in fact. And after that video, you'll definitely know whether it's worthy to jump into that world. Thank you all for sticking by. This is Randomjeanc, signing out.